Was barn air quality taken into consideration for the environmental aspects of feed efficiency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when looking at the review that we did, there is a section on temperature. So both like when the temperature is too cold or when we're seeing heat stress and how that impacts the pig, but nothing on the air quality was included in that. And so I'm not as familiar with maybe some of we know air quality is important and ventilation is important, but how much it impacts the pig in a quantifiable way, I don't know that answer. There might be some studies I'm not familiar with, but in this review, we would have focused more on like the temperature aspect of the environment versus the air quality. But I'm sure the air quality impacts it, so that's something to consider as well, along with temperature, the type of barn, the number of pigs per pen. And so it's kind of an infinite amount of aspects in pig production can impact efficiency, which is kind of the interesting part of this project that we're working on.
Yeah, certainly. I think the next question in terms of a specific environment that was looked at, um, swine housing environments definitely are not consistent across the swine production industry or swine production as a whole. And so there are a lot of different environments that we consider. And I don't know if Aaron or Caitlin want to discuss that, but it is one of many of the things that we think about in terms of variation across our operations.
Right. Is my sound coming through okay? Sorry for
Mhm.
the trouble earlier. There are definitely some regional impacts when we look at it from the point it leaves the animal and beyond. I talked through some of the different systems or base cases we looked at for manure, but then we also um, the soil group and looks at it from that point when we apply the manure, and then it's producing different crops based on different regions. And so the whole picture, I think, needs to be taken in a regional context. I'll let Caitlin finish up some comments there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with both of the comments that have been made. You're going to see all different types. Certainly, regional, we'll see some impacts based on region and maybe how the housing types are grouped. But even from two similar barns, we have our home farm here, we call it, as well as like a segregated nursery farm. And even between those two farms, we see differences in performance. Between two barns next to each other, we see differences in the efficiency. So certainly there's a lot of factors that impact that, and housing is one of those. And so all the different factors that go into housing differ. We tried to note in that review if we think there was confounding factors that maybe also impacted the efficiency, but I don't believe we went into any specific housing factors in that review. Is more when you think environment along with temperature, health, and then there was a little bit of genetics section, but really referred to that genetics paper that was also part of this project, which would go more in depth on that.
Thank you both. I think we have time for maybe one more question. So the very last question that I see here, actually there's one underneath it, but we'll land with this last one. What are the potential interactions between the technology that both Caitlin and Aaron described? So for example, if something improves efficiency of pigs, but then increases nutrient losses in manure, or vice versa, if something can be complementary. Has there been anything, as you both have done your work, that kind of makes you go, oh yeah, if I put this together and this together, we can do a better job or conflict each other?
Yeah, I think that was the basis behind our approach to look at these different technologies relative to the influent amount versus a set concentration in the manure. Not a perfect approach, but it was for this exact reason. I think one example of maybe some different or not necessarily contradictory results, but some downstream impacts would be higher fiber diets or some diets that might influence that nutrient partitioning in the animal, like sugar beet pulp or something, is going to influence where that nitrogen leaves the animal, for example. But then if you are adding some more in different fibers, that could influence ultimately the digestion of that manure or make it maybe more digestible, maybe, or more powerful as a digestate, as a digester feedstock than not. So yeah, the potential interactions are pretty numerous.
Yeah, I would agree that there's a lot across just even thinking of nutrition. I talked a little bit about the precision feeding, or can we increase the number of phases so we're meeting the pig's requirement exactly all the time. But then what is the impacts then on the mill, the transportation, all of the logistics behind that? So maybe we're reducing excretion a tiny bit, but then we're putting so much energy and transportation on the front side. So that's why I think a project that like this that connects all of the aspects is really important, because the review on nutrition only looks at how to improve nutrition, but that might not on the manure side or the feed production side, it may have a bigger negative than it does a positive. So balancing all of those aspects.
One where we maybe have some win-wins would be if we can further reduce water wastage, feed wastage at the feeder or the drinker level. It will have implications for our manure storage and application if we change the composition of that manure, but it is, I think, a loss that doesn't help anybody, right? So I think that's one that we could look at.
That's great. Yeah, so again, we want to thank everyone for coming on today. This is one example. Many of our other industries are also looking at LCAs and have a variety of projects going. I know we visited a few websites for dairy and others, and so there are many efforts across our livestock systems to try to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support our producers as they get asked these questions by others as well. So again, we're happy to answer questions offline. If you have any, certainly feel free to reach out to any of us or anyone on the consortium. We're always happy to engage you, and certainly we appreciate any feedback as well. And so with that, I think we are concluding our presentation for today.